My name is Rebecca Hale, 36 years old from Scottsdale, Arizona, and do you have this gut feeling when something doesn't sound right? I knew something was wrong the moment Andrew wouldn't meet my eyes. We were standing in the center of the ballroom at the Desert Horizon Charity Gala. This was our anniversary night. 12 years. He had insisted we make an appearance before leaving early for what he called a surprise. I hadn't questioned it. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. The host tapped the microphone and smiled too wide. Before we continue, she said, we'd like to thank our platinum donors. Tonight's largest private contribution comes with a little celebration attached. A screen behind her lit up. A resort logo filled the wall. Oceanfront, private villas, infinity pools. A vacation package. People clapped politely. I glanced at Andrew, confused but amused, waiting for him to squeeze my hand. He didn't. And a special congratulations, the host continued, reading from her tablet, to Andrew Hale and his guest, Morgan Pierce. Enjoy your week in Maui. The room didn't go silent right away. It took a second. Like a delayed echo. I heard my name nowhere. I stared at the screen. Andrew Hale, Morgan Pierce, my maid of honor, my best friend of 17 years. The woman who stood next to me at my wedding, holding my dress, crying harder than anyone else. I turned slowly. Andrew's face had drained of color. He looked like a man who had just watched the ground disappear beneath his feet. Morgan wasn't there. But I could see her anyway. I could picture her smug little smile, the way she always tilted her head when she thought she was winning. Someone laughed, nervously. Someone else whispered my name. Rebecca. I felt it ripple through the room like a dropped glass. The host froze, realizing too late. Oh, there seems to be a... I raised my hand, not shaking. Not dramatic, just enough to stop her. It's fine, I said. My voice carried. Too calm, too clear. I turned to Andrew. You booked a romantic vacation, I said evenly. For yourself and my maid of honor? His mouth opened, closed. He reached for my arm. I stepped back. Not today. Rebecca, he whispered, eyes pleading now, desperate to contain this. This isn't... Don't, I said, louder, firmer. The word landed hard. Every conversation in the room died. I could feel hundreds of eyes locking onto us. Investors, friends, couples we'd hosted for holidays, people who had eaten at my table. I looked around, then back at him. You told me we were leaving early because you had a surprise. He swallowed. The reservation, I continued, was for Maui. 2 names, yours and hers. A beat. So tell me, I said, when exactly were you planning to tell your wife she wasn't invited to her own anniversary? His face cracked. I saw it then. Not guilt. Fear. Fear of exposure. That was the moment something inside me snapped into place. Morgan had been around constantly these past months. Dinners. Calls. Work advice. Late texts Andrew brushed off. I had ignored the way she stopped looking me in the eye. I had ignored the way he guarded his phone. I had told myself I was being paranoid. I wasn't. Someone behind me gasped softly. I didn't turn around. Andrew leaned in, voice shaking. Please, not here. I smiled at him, not kindly. You're right, I said. Not here. I reached up and unclasped the necklace he gave me last year. An anniversary gift I had thanked him for while he was already planning this. I placed it carefully into his hand. You should save this, I said. You're going to need the money. The room erupted. Murmurs. Phones coming out. People pretending not to stare while staring anyway. I picked up my clutch. Smoothed my dress. I refused to look small. As I walked away, someone called my name. I didn't answer. At the entrance, I turned back one last time. Andrew stood frozen, necklace dangling from his fingers, exposed under the chandelier lights he loved so much. Enjoy the trip, I said. I hope it was worth it. Then I walked out. The desert night air hit me like a slap, warm, sharp, real. I didn't cry. Not then. I sat in my car for a full minute, hands on the wheel, heart pounding, but my mind was already racing ahead. Hisab numbers, account structures. The trust Andrew never bothered to understand. The fact that most of our early assets were in my name because his credit was unstable back then. He had forgotten who built the foundation. I pulled out my phone. First call, my attorney. Second, the bank. Third, the real estate broker who'd been begging me to list the house for months. Inside the ballroom, Andrew was probably still trying to explain, to spin, to control the damage. He had no idea what was coming. I drove away without looking back. And as the city lights blurred past, I made myself one promise. Clear, unbreakable, final. He took my trust in public. I would take everything else in daylight. Andrew and I didn't start rich. That part always gets rewritten after the fall, like money somehow came before the marriage. It didn't. We met in our mid-20s, both tired, both ambitious in quiet ways. He had charm and big plans. I had structure, discipline, a need to make things stable. When his first real estate deal collapsed, it was my savings that kept us afloat. When his credit was shaky, it was my name that went on the lease, then the mortgage, then the first investment account. We told ourselves it was temporary, practical, a team decision. Some things never changed after that. I handled the finances, I organized the taxes, I tracked the accounts. Andrew liked to talk vision. I liked to make it real. That balance became our marriage, or so I thought. Morgan came into my life long before Andrew. College roommates, late-night talks. She was the one who helped me plan my wedding, who stood beside me as my maid of honor, who held my hands when my mother died 2 years later. When Andrew worked late, Morgan filled the silence. When I doubted myself, she reassured me. I trusted her completely. That trust blinded me to the slow shifts. Andrew started traveling more. Deals, he said. Morgan suddenly knew details about his work before I did. She'd drop comments like, "He's under so much pressure," or, "You should really let him relax more." I remember once, half joking, saying, "You sound like his spokesperson." She laughed too fast. I ignored the way Andrew stopped sharing passwords for security reasons. The way he flinched when my phone buzzed late at night, then accused me of being distracted. I ignored the way Morgan stopped coming over when I was home, but always seemed to be around when I wasn't. I told myself grown marriages go through phases. I told myself loyalty didn't disappear overnight. The stakes weren't just emotional. We had a life wrapped tightly together. Our home, joint investments, a family trust my father left me that I had partially folded into our portfolio because Andrew insisted it would grow faster. I had done that believing we were building something permanent. I was wrong. The confirmation didn't come from Andrew or Morgan. It came from my sister. She called me the morning after the gala. I hadn't slept. I was sitting at the kitchen counter staring at the same cold cup of coffee, replaying everything I'd ignored. "Rebecca," she said carefully. "I didn't want to say anything before. But after last night, I think you should know." She paused. I felt my chest tighten. I saw them together. Weeks ago. At the airport. Andrew and Morgan. They weren't trying to hide. The room tilted. "They kissed," she added. "Not a friendly kiss. I assumed you knew." I thanked her. Hung up. Sat there in the silence. That was the moment denial died. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment of weakness. It was a pattern, a plan, a betrayal that required time, secrecy, and intent from both of them. Andrew hadn't just cheated. He had calculated. And Morgan hadn't just crossed a line. She had erased it. I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and opened the safe. Andrew never touched because he said it made him nervous. Then inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years. Trust agreements, asset breakdowns, names. Mine appeared more than his. That was when the grief hardened into something else. They thought they had taken everything from me in one public moment. They were wrong. They had only shown me exactly where to aim. I didn't wake up that morning angry. I woke up clear. There's a difference. Anger clouds judgment. Clarity sharpens it. I showered, dressed, and made the bed like it was any other weekday. I needed my body to move before my emotions tried to catch up. By the time I poured coffee, I wasn't shaking anymore. I was thinking. Andrew had always underestimated my ability to act without noise. He mistook my calm for passivity. That was about to cost him. My attorney returned my call at 8:17 a.m. I'd worked with her years earlier when my father's estate was settled. She didn't ask emotional questions. She asked strategic ones. Are there children? No. Joint accounts? Yes. But most assets originated from my inheritance. Any infidelity evidence? Plenty, I said. And more coming. She paused, then said, Good. Do not warn him. We move first. That sentence flipped something inside me. By 9 a.m., I was at the bank. I sat across from a woman who had known me for a decade. I didn't explain the betrayal. I didn't need to. I slid the trust documentation across the desk. I need to temporarily freeze any discretionary joint access, I said. Effective immediately. She read the pages, nodded once. I'll process this now. Andrew had always liked waking up to full control. That morning, he didn't. From the parking lot, I called the brokerage firm, then the accountant, then the property manager for the rental Andrew liked to call his, even though my name was on the deed. Each call was clean, direct, professional. I wasn't destroying anything. I was reclaiming it. The house was next. I walked through it slowly, noting what I wanted and what I didn't. The art on the walls we picked together, gone. The guest room furniture Morgan slept in once after drinking too much, donated. I packed only what mattered. The rest could stay behind like evidence. At noon, the real estate broker arrived. She'd been circling us for months. You're serious? She asked, eyes wide. I've never been more, I said. We discussed numbers, timelines, exposure. She didn't flinch when I told her I wanted it listed quietly but fast. By the time she left, the house Andrew thought anchored him was already halfway out of his hands. At 1:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. Andrew. We need to talk. Andrew. This is getting out of control. Andrew. You're overreacting. I stared at the screen for a moment, then turned the phone face down. Control. That word again. He still thought this was an argument. At 3:00 p.m., I met with my attorney in person. Papers were drafted. Boundaries established. Every step designed to protect me before he even understood the terrain had shifted. You'll hear from him, she warned. I know, I said. As if on cue, my phone lit up again. Calls this time. One after another. I let them ring. When I finally answered, it wasn't because I owed him a conversation. It was because I wanted him to hear my voice. Rebecca, he said immediately. What did you do? I corrected a mistake, I replied. You froze the accounts, he said. I can't access. I know. A sharp inhale on his end, panic leaking through. You had no right, he said. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. You're confusing marriage with permission. Silence. Rebecca, he said again, softer now. Let's slow this down. I looked around the nearly empty living room. Boxes stacked. Space opening. I already did, I said. You just didn't notice. I hung up before he could respond. Andrew was still standing at the edge of the wreckage, trying to figure out what he'd lost. I was already moving forward, quietly, decisively, and without him. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came in waves. Andrew didn't notice the first one immediately. He still thought this was a storm he could wait out. That illusion lasted until the following morning, when his assistant called to say the company card had declined, twice, during a routine booking. He texted me within minutes. Andrew. There's a problem with the corporate account. Andrew. Call me. I didn't. By mid-morning, the calls started coming from other directions. His brother, a business partner. Even one of his investors, pretending to be casual while fishing for reassurance. I answered none of them. Silence does something interesting to people who are used to control. It makes them reckless. Andrew showed up at the house that afternoon. I watched him through the doorbell camera before deciding whether to open it. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, emotionally. His confidence had been built on access, money, stability. Me. With those gone, the edges of him were already fraying. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "What's happening?" he demanded, trying to sound steady. "My accounts are restricted. The brokerage won't return my calls. Someone canceled the Aspen trip." I leaned against the doorframe. "You mean your trip?" He flinched. "Rebecca, this is serious." "So was what you did." He ran a hand through his hair. "You're hurting me on purpose." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." He stepped closer. I didn't move. "Morgan doesn't even understand why you're reacting like this," he said. "She thinks you're embarrassed and lashing out." I laughed then. Not loud, just enough to surprise him. "She thinks that?" I asked. He nodded quickly, relieved to have found a thread. "Yes, she's worried about you." "Tell Morgan," I said calmly, "that I know about the airport, and the kissing, and the planning." His face drained. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said too fast. "That's fine," I replied. "You don't have to." I closed the door. Inside, my phone buzzed almost immediately. Morgan. "Rebecca, please call me." Morgan. "I had no idea things would go this far." Morgan. "This isn't what it looks like." I blocked her without responding. That's when the social circle began to react. People who had watched the gala footage circulate started choosing sides. Not out of loyalty, but self-preservation. Invitations Andrew had counted on quietly disappeared. A charity board he sat on requested time to review recent events. One of his investors postponed a meeting indefinitely. By the end of the week, his name was being removed from things without explanation. Morgan's fallout came faster and louder. She worked in marketing. Reputation was her currency. When screenshots from the gala spread, people began asking questions she couldn't spin away. Clients stopped returning emails. A coworker she thought was a friend unfollowed her publicly. She tried to post a photo from the resort anyway. Smiling. Ocean behind her. Caption about unexpected change. The comments tore her apart. "Isn't that your best friend's husband?" "Hope it was worth it." Disgusting. She deleted the post within an hour. Andrew called again that night. This time I answered on speaker. "You're enjoying this," he said, voice tight. "No," I replied. "I'm observing it." "You've turned everyone against me," he snapped. "I didn't say anything," I said. "You did." Silence. "They won't take my calls," he said finally. "Not even my father." That was new. His father had always defended him, excused his behavior as ambition. Hearing that line of support had cracked told me the damage was spreading into places Andrew couldn't reach. "I can fix this," Andrew said. "If you'd just talk to people, explain." "Explain what?" I asked. "That you planned a vacation with my maid of honor?" He exhaled sharply. "You're enjoying the power." I smiled. "You're confusing consequences with cruelty." There was a knock at my door the next morning. Not Andrew. It was his sister. She looked exhausted. "I just wanted you to know," she said quietly. "We didn't know, and we don't support him." I nodded. "Thank you for telling me." She hesitated. "He's spiraling." I held her gaze. "That's not my responsibility anymore." That afternoon, Andrew tried one last tactic. He sent a long message, apologetic, measured, carefully written to sound reflective without admitting anything specific. It ended with one sentence. "We can still handle this privately." I didn't respond, because it was already public. And as Andrew sat alone, watching doors close and resources disappear, I understood something important. This wasn't revenge yet. This was gravity, and it had only just started pulling him down. The second confrontation wasn't planned for drama. It was scheduled. Temporary orders, financial disclosure. A mandatory appearance at the county courthouse that Andrew's attorney insisted would be routine. He told Andrew it was a chance to stabilize things, to show cooperation, to prove he wasn't the man everyone suddenly thought he was. That was his mistake. The courthouse lobby was full that morning. Not just lawyers and clerks. There were reporters. Someone had tipped them off. Maybe a rival. Maybe one of the investors Andrew had burned. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. I arrived alone. No sunglasses, no entourage. Just a tailored blazer and a folder under my arm. I looked exactly like what I was. Prepared. Andrew arrived 20 minutes late, flanked by his attorney and, unexpectedly, Morgan. That part surprised even me. She looked different, smaller. Her confidence had evaporated under the weight of public judgment. She wore a conservative dress, hair pulled tight, eyes darting around the lobby as if looking for exits. When she saw me, she froze. Andrew leaned toward her, whispering urgently. She nodded, but her hand slipped out of his grip. People noticed. Cameras lifted. Andrew stiffened when he realized what was happening. He scanned the room, searching for allies. He found none. We were called into a conference room for preliminary mediation. It was supposed to be private, but the glass walls made that impossible. Anyone walking by could see everything. Andrew sat across from me, jaw tight. Morgan hovered behind him, unsure where she belonged. The mediator spoke calmly. Procedures, timelines, temporary asset restrictions. Then my attorney slid the folder forward. Before we proceed, she said, my client would like to clarify a few matters on record. Andrew's eyes flicked to mine. Warning. Fear. The mediator nodded. Go ahead. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. I simply spoke. I want it noted, I said, that the vacation purchased under joint marital funds was not for marital use. Andrew's attorney shifted uncomfortably. The reservation, I continued, was made for Andrew Hale and Morgan Pierce. A pause. Morgan's breath caught audibly. I also want it noted, I said, that Ms. Pierce was my maid of honor and a trusted family member at the time of this booking. The mediator looked up sharply. Ms. Pierce, is that accurate? Morgan opened her mouth, closed it. Andrew jumped in. This is unnecessary, he said. She's not a party to this. Actually, my attorney replied smoothly, she is relevant to the misuse of marital assets. Morgan's face flushed. I didn't know about the money, she said quickly. Andrew told me it was his. I turned to her for the first time. You never asked, I said. Her eyes met mine. For a split second, I saw something like regret. Then fear overtook it. I can't be part of this, she said suddenly, stepping back. This is between you two. Andrew spun toward her. Morgan, don't... I'm done, she said, voice shaking but loud enough for the glass walls to carry it. I didn't sign up for this. She grabbed her bag and walked out. Cameras flashed immediately. Andrew sat there, abandoned in real time. The mediator cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, do you dispute the use of joint funds? Andrew stared at the empty doorway, then at me. No, he said quietly. The words hit harder than any denial. My attorney wasn't finished. We're also requesting temporary exclusive access to the marital home, she said. Given the circumstances and the pending sale. Andrew shook his head. That's my house. I smiled slightly. Your name isn't on the original deed. The mediator looked down at the documents. Then back up. Ms. Hale is correct. Andrew's shoulders sagged. Outside the room, reporters pressed closer to the glass. Someone whispered, "That's him." Phones recorded everything. The mediator asked if there was anything else. I stood. "I have one thing," I said. Andrew looked up, eyes bloodshot. "Rebecca, please." I ignored him. "I just want to be clear," I said calmly, addressing the room, the glass, the audience Andrew couldn't escape. "I didn't expose this. I responded to it. I turned to Andrew then. Fully. You planned a future, I said, without bothering to remove me from the present. The mediator called a recess. As we stood, Andrew reached for me instinctively. I stepped back. Outside, microphones surged forward. Someone shouted a question I didn't answer. Andrew tried to speak. No one listened. That evening, a clip circulated everywhere. Just one line, recorded cleanly through the glass, captioned by strangers. I didn't expose this. I responded to it. It spread faster than anything Andrew had ever built. And as he stood alone on the courthouse steps, no wife, no mistress, no narrative left, I realized something important. The second humiliation wasn't louder. It was final. Because this time he wasn't just embarrassed. He was exposed, and everyone knew it. Andrew didn't retreat after the courthouse. He regrouped. That's what men like him do when the ground shifts under their feet. They don't reflect, they rebrand. Within 48 hours, his name started appearing in places it hadn't before. Carefully placed, softened, framed. An anonymous source told a business blog that the divorce was amicable but emotionally charged. A quote appeared from a close friend, describing Andrew as a private man caught in a misunderstanding that spiraled publicly. Someone leaked that I was leveraging optics to gain advantage. He was building a narrative. And for a moment, it worked. People love a redemption arc. They love the idea that a man who falls publicly must be given room to recover. Comment sections shifted. The word context started appearing. Phrases like two sides and messy marriage crept in. Andrew texted me for the first time since the courthouse. Andrew. I'm trying to calm this down. Andrew. We don't need to destroy each other. I didn't reply. I was busy reviewing emails. Because Andrew had underestimated one thing. I keep records. I always have. When we built our life, I tracked everything. Out of habit, out of responsibility, out of a need to understand the shape of our world. That included shared calendars, expense reports, message backups. Not because I suspected betrayal, but because I didn't like surprises. Irony has a sense of humor. I didn't leak anything myself. I didn't have to. A journalist reached out to my attorney asking for clarification on a timeline discrepancy in Andrew's misunderstanding. My attorney forwarded the request to me with a single line. We can correct the record if you want. I told her to wait. Andrew went further. He did a podcast. Small audience, but the right demographic. He spoke calmly, carefully. He said words like regret and boundaries without naming what he regretted or whose boundaries he crossed. He implied I was emotionally volatile. That was when I decided the narrative had lasted long enough. I released nothing publicly. Instead, I forwarded a folder to my attorney. Inside were timestamps. Calendar invites labeled site visit that aligned perfectly with Morgan's work-from-home days. Flight confirmations synced to weekends I was visiting my sister. A reservation receipt showing the Maui trip booked weeks before the gala, paid partially from a joint account Andrew claimed he didn't monitor closely. Most damaging of all, a message thread. Not romantic, not explicit. Worse, logistical. Andrew. She suspects something. Morgan. Then stop bringing me up around her. Andrew. After Maui, we'll figure out the rest. My attorney sent those documents, without commentary, to the same journalist who had asked for clarification. Within hours, the story changed. Headlines shifted tone. Language hardened. Timeline raises. Questions inhale divorce receipts. Complicate misunderstanding. Narrative documents. Suggest affair was planned, not accidental. Andrew called me that night. I didn't answer. The hashtag appeared the next morning. Not something cruel. Something precise. Planned. Not accidental. People latched onto it because it did the work for them. It reframed everything Andrew had tried to soften. It stripped away ambiguity. Screenshots began circulating, cropped, redacted, undeniable. Influencers weighed in. Legal commentators explained what misuse of marital funds actually meant. Women shared stories of being gaslit by men who insisted betrayal was just poor judgment. Morgan tried to intervene. She released a statement through a friend, claiming she'd been misled and emotionally manipulated. It backfired instantly. People noticed the dates, the duration, the planning. Someone pulled a quote from an old post of hers about never betraying sisterhood. It spread faster than Andrew's podcast ever did. By the end of the week, his investors stopped pretending. One pulled out quietly. Another demanded a review. A third issued a statement distancing themselves, pending further developments. Andrew's name became a liability. The same people who once praised his vision now avoided tagging him. Andrew texted again. Andrew, you've made your point. Andrew, this is turning into a witch hunt. I finally responded. Me. No. Me. This is accountability catching up. He didn't reply. Instead, his attorney contacted mine requesting a mutual de-escalation agreement. They wanted me to stop cooperating with media inquiries, to let the dust settle. My attorney laughed when she told me. They're scared, she said. This isn't about reputation anymore. It's about exposure. That night, I watched Andrew on another screen, this time silent. A clip from the courthouse replayed beside screenshots of receipts. His earlier words echoed back at him in captions written by strangers. This isn't what it looks like. I didn't mean for it to go this far. We can still handle this privately. None of it landed anymore. Because the truth had structure now. Dates. Proof. Pattern. You can't PR your way out of a timeline. By the end of the escalation, Andrew wasn't fighting for sympathy. He was fighting to stay relevant. And as I turned off the screen, I understood the shift. This wasn't about revenge yet. This was about narrative collapse. The version of Andrew that survived on charm and plausible deniability was gone. And there was nothing he could say that would bring him back. By the time the legal phase truly began, Andrew wasn't fighting me anymore. He was fighting gravity with paperwork. The temporary orders became permanent faster than his attorney expected. The judge didn't raise their voice. They didn't need to. The documentation spoke clearly. Asset origins, misuse of funds, timeline consistency. Patterns don't argue. They sit there and wait to be acknowledged. The marital accounts were formally separated. The trust was ruled non-marital, exactly as my father had structured it years ago, a fact Andrew had dismissed as technical when he encouraged me to fold parts of it into our portfolio. That technicality saved me. The house went first. Andrew tried to contest the sale, arguing emotional attachment, years of shared memories. The judge glanced at the deed, then at him. Attachment doesn't override ownership, they said. The house sold within 30 days. I moved on. Andrew didn't. His financial unraveling accelerated after that. Without access to shared liquidity, his business deals stalled. Projects that relied on personal guarantees collapsed when those guarantees vanished. Lines of credit tightened. One bank quietly declined renewal. Another requested immediate clarification. Andrew had always lived one assumption away from stability. Now, every assumption was gone. His father stopped returning calls. That hit him harder than any legal ruling. I learned about it through his sister, who asked to meet me for coffee. She looked tired, older somehow, as if stress had finally made its way through the family. He showed up at my parents' house, she said quietly. Unannounced. Dad wouldn't let him in. I didn't react. He told Andrew he'd embarrassed the family, she continued. Said loyalty doesn't excuse deception, especially not when it cost other people their integrity. She hesitated. He cut him off, financially. Completely. I nodded once. That was his choice. It was, she agreed. I just wanted you to know. We see it now. Andrew's brother withdrew next. Quietly. No announcement. Just absence. When Andrew asked him for a loan, the answer came back short and final. I can't help you. The circle closed fast. Morgan didn't fare better. She lost her job before the divorce finalized. Officially, it was a restructuring. Unofficially, clients didn't want their brand associated with someone trending for betrayal. She tried freelancing. The inquiries dried up when her name was searched. She called Andrew once, desperate. He didn't answer. That was when she realized she'd miscalculated. She had bet on Andrew's stability, his protection, his ability to cushion the fall. There was no cushion. In court, Andrew tried one last pivot. He claimed emotional distress, said he'd acted out of pressure, that the marriage had been cold, that I was withholding empathy. The judge listened patiently, then asked one question. "Did you plan the vacation in advance?" Andrew hesitated. "Yes," he said. "And did you inform your spouse?" No answer. "That's all," the judge said. Custody wasn't an issue. We didn't have children. But the ruling still carved him down. Alimony denied, claims dismissed, responsibility assigned where it belonged. By the time the final paperwork was signed, Andrew looked hollow. He asked to speak to me outside the courtroom. I didn't want to. I agreed anyway. He stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. "I didn't think it would end like this," he said. I studied him. The man who once spoke in certainties now sounded unsure of every word. "You thought I'd absorb it," I said. "Like everything else." He looked up. "I thought you'd protect me." I met his eyes. I did. For years. There was nothing else to say. Weeks later, I heard he'd moved out of the city, downsized, sold what he could, rented a small place far from the life he used to show off. People stopped asking about him. That's the part no one warns you about. The silence after the spectacle. The way someone can fall so thoroughly they become irrelevant before they become regretful. The legal dismantling wasn't loud. It was efficient. And when it was over, there was no victory speech. Just distance. Andrew lost the money, the access, the protection of family. But what broke him wasn't any single loss. It was realizing that no one was left to blame. The last time Andrew and I met, it wasn't in a courtroom or a public space. It was in a quiet office building on the edge of town, the kind designed to feel neutral. No personality, no history. My attorney had suggested we finalize a few remaining signatures there. Andrew had asked if he could speak to me alone afterward. I agreed. Not because I owed him closure, because I wanted to see who he was without leverage. He arrived early. I noticed that immediately. The old Andrew was never early, unless something was slipping through his fingers. He stood when I entered, unsure whether to hug me, shake my hand, or stay frozen. He chose frozen. "You look different," he said. "So do you," I replied. It wasn't cruel. It was factual. He'd lost weight. His suit didn't quite fit the way it used to. The confidence he wore like armor had thinned into something brittle. We signed the papers in silence, pens scratched, pages flipped, a process ending exactly how it should, clean, documented, final. When the last document was collected, the assistant left the room. The door clicked shut behind her. Andrew exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. I just wanted to say, "I never meant to hurt you like this." I didn't respond immediately. I took a moment to sit back, fold my hands, and really look at him. The man I married. The man who betrayed me. The man who had underestimated me at every critical point. "Andrew," I said calmly, "you didn't mean to get caught." His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "It's accurate," I replied. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I lost everything." I tilted my head slightly. "You lost what wasn't yours to gamble." He shook his head. "You don't understand how hard this has been." I let the silence stretch. Not to punish him, but to force him to hear himself. "I understand exactly how hard it's been," I said. "I just didn't make it your problem." His eyes filled. Real tears this time. Not performative. Not strategic. "I loved you," he said. I believed him. And that was the saddest part. "You loved the version of me who made your life easier," I said. "The one who absorbed risk, who fixed gaps, who stayed quiet. He swallowed. I still love you. I stood. I don't doubt that, I said gently. But love without respect is just appetite. That landed. He stood too, suddenly frantic. I've changed. I see things differently now. I picked up my bag. You see consequences. That's not the same thing. He stepped closer. If I could go back? You can't, I said. Not sharply, not angrily. Just truth. He looked at me then like a man standing at the edge of something he finally understood. I don't know who I am without you, he admitted. I met his eyes. That, I said, is why this had to end. Silence filled the room again. This time, it felt complete. He nodded slowly, as if accepting a verdict he'd avoided hearing until now. Is there anything I can do? I thought about it. About all the apologies that came too late. About the plans he made without me. About the public humiliation he never once tried to prevent. Only manage. Yes, I said finally. Hope flickered in his eyes. Leave me alone, I said. Completely. The hope vanished. I walked to the door. My hand was already on the handle when he spoke again. Rebecca. I paused. Didn't turn. I never thought you'd walk away like this. I smiled to myself. That's because, I said, you always thought I needed you more than you needed me. I opened the door. As I stepped into the hallway, I felt it. Not triumph, not bitterness. Relief. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for a response. Because the last thing Andrew ever needed from me was another explanation. And the last thing I ever owed him was my presence. Time didn't heal me. It clarified me. 6 months after the divorce finalized, my life didn't look dramatic from the outside. There were no grand reveals, no flashy reinvention, just quiet stability. The kind that doesn't ask for permission or validation. I moved into a smaller place by choice. Light-filled. Calm. Nothing in it carried a memory I hadn't chosen to keep. I built my mornings deliberately. Coffee on the balcony, emails answered before the world got loud, workouts that strengthened my body instead of punishing it. I stopped rushing. I stopped explaining. That alone changed everything. Work followed. The trust I'd protected for years finally became something I used intentionally. I partnered with people who valued transparency, who didn't need charm to mask risk. My name began circulating again, not as someone's wife, not as a scandal footnote, but as a woman who knew how to build without cutting corners. That reputation lasted longer than gossip ever could. Occasionally, someone would ask about Andrew, carefully, as if saying his name too loudly might reopen something. He's doing okay, I'd say, because that was true enough. He had found work in another city, smaller deals, smaller circles. He existed now without the insulation he once relied on, and that was the difference. I wasn't watching him anymore. The real transformation didn't come from winning anything. It came from no longer orienting my life around what had been taken from me. One afternoon, months later, I ran into Morgan's name by accident. A mutual acquaintance mentioned she'd moved again. New industry, new city, new story. I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just distance. That surprised me, because for a long time, I thought closure would feel like confrontation or confession or regret. I thought it would be loud. It wasn't. It was the absence of weight, the absence of monitoring other people's behavior, moods, loyalty, the absence of performing trust while quietly carrying doubt. I didn't have to check phones. I didn't have to read between lines. I didn't have to negotiate my intuition down to make someone else comfortable. That was freedom. I stopped replaying the gala in my head, stopped hearing the silence of that room, the way my name hung in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. That moment had been sharp, but it wasn't the wound. The wound had been everything before it, and that had finally healed. One evening, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights come on, thinking about how easily a life can be misjudged when viewed from the outside, How many people stay quiet inside structures that no longer protect them because they're afraid of what collapse might cost? I had learned something important. Betrayal doesn't destroy you. Delay does. The moment I stopped delaying my own clarity, everything else fell into place. Andrew never contacted me again. He kept that promise, at least. And even if he hadn't, it wouldn't have mattered. The door wasn't just closed. It no longer existed. I didn't forgive him in the way people expect. Not with absolution or warmth. I forgave myself for staying too long, for explaining too much, for mistaking loyalty for endurance. That was the real ending. Not revenge, not triumph. Just a life rebuilt with intention, owned completely, and no longer shaped by someone else's appetite for risk. If betrayal taught me anything, it's this. When someone shows you who they are in public, believe them. And when you finally walk away without asking to be understood, you don't lose anything worth keeping. Thank you for tuning into the Velvet Revenge channel. Please subscribe and hit the like button for more stories like this. See you soon?